Yo, welcome to Alpha Omega University. Welcome back. I know you guys noticed I don't have the here, give me a second. I gotta go back and forth and make sure everything's good. Not everything is perfect. It's not perfect yet, but we're gonna make it perfect little by little, one day at a time. All right. I can't make it full screen, the video, so the video is still gonna be small. I found out that it's not an issue with the Twitch. I thought it was an issue with the Twitch. It actually is an issue with Chrome, with Google Chrome. So yeah, apparently there's a fix somewhere out there in the internet somewhere. So I just gotta find it. All right. So hopefully by next week I'll be able to have the videos full screen, so you'll be able to see them. Anyway, as usual, all the videos are from the last few days. There's a couple that are like 5-6 days old. All right. And the reason is I mean, it's off season, right? I explained this last week. It's off season, so there's not a lot of fights going on in general. There are some really good fights happening though, especially on the West server. We got some fun season 20 stuff coming up. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a second, but essentially today we got episode 26. All right, we got bait and switch. Today is actually the start of a new series, and this series is gonna be happening every other Friday, right? So next Friday we're gonna have a stream as usual, but it's not gonna be this series. It's gonna be like a standalone episode talking about other things. I think next week is gonna be movement and positioning. So that's a pretty heavy and important episode. So don't miss it. But yeah, so this is gonna be the series of the calling style series, right? So if you have watched episode, I want to say it was like episode 5 or 6, something like that. It was at the very beginning. We did an episode called Calling Styles, and we introduced the different styles in which callers would be able to call their Zergs, and the different kind of the different ideas about how they use their engages, and when they pull back, when they engage on the enemy, when they push, when they break through chokes, or when to hold back, that kind of stuff, right? So all those things kind of had to do with the strategy that they employed as an overall strategy. And this is exactly what we're going to be talking about today. The difference between the episode that we did, a few months ago and the series that we're doing now is that we're actually going to look in depth at each individual strategy. All right. So if you want to just kind of look at like the overall and just kind of understand what like the big picture stuff for the strategies that callers make in the game, then you got to watch that episode. It's like episode 5 or 6. It's Calling Styles, right? So that one just kind of gives you like an overall view at all of them. But today we're going to be looking at bait and switch strategy specifically. And the reason I want to start with this strategy is because this is the #1 strategy that everybody's kind of using right now, right? Like the majority of the players in the game, the majority of the callers in the game, I should say, are actually using this exact strategy, which is bait and switch. In a nutshell, I'm just going to say it real quick, just what it is. It's basically you're going to go and bait the enemy to engage you, and then you're going to counter engage them with a full engage or something like that. All right. The point is to bait them, and then the switch is going to be the engage, right? So we'll go deep into it to see why it works. We're going to see the things that make it not work, right? And why people do it. But also we're gonna, if we have time towards the end of the episode, which I think we will have some time, we're gonna look at some videos of some callers having done exactly this, right? This bait and switch strategy. Now, the bait and switch strategy today is played very similarly across the board. Everybody tends to do it pretty much the same, right? And we'll talk about that more. But essentially, there are other ways that the bait and switch strategy applies. It's just that those ways are not being used as much today. All right. Either way, it's good to understand them and to know them so that when you encounter this against an enemy, then you know what you need to do in response, right? So the better we understand the enemy, the better chances we have of winning. I don't have any real announcements today. I'm trying to think. No, I don't think we have anything. But essentially, again, next week, the next stream is going to be the episode 27. That's going to be the movement and positioning. And then the week after that, we'll continue this series. All right. So it'll be like that. 1 week on, 1 week off for this series. The schedule is at the beginning of the video. So every time that you see that schedule, you can kind of see the days there. But all right. So tomorrow is going to be reset day, right? So I want to talk a little bit about the season, the upcoming season, because it's not just reset day, it's the beginning of the season tomorrow, right? And so I want to talk a little bit about the season from last season. I want to talk a little bit about the season that's coming. And I'm not particularly too interested in the names of people or the names of guilds, right? Obviously, we're going to talk about some because they're the ones that are quote unquote the strongest, right? So we got to talk about them, absolutely. But in general, we got to look at what happened between last season and now moving into this season. What are the changes? What are the differences that are happening? What should we look out for? I know a lot of people have been asking, what's gonna be the new meta, right? What we know that changes are happening. SBI nerfed Demon Fang, right? And they're nerfing it again. I think that next patch is gonna happen like next week or in 2 weeks, something like that. But anyway, it's happening soon-ish. All right. It's basically around the corner. So Demon Fang got nerfed hard because Demon Fang was the #1 weapon that was used pretty much the entire season last season. And so now the question is becoming, well, what's going on, right? They also nerfed Stalker Jacket. So if you don't know about those changes, I know I didn't go over them, and I don't really have too much of the time. If we have time at the end of the video, which I don't think we'll have the time, to be honest, but if we do, I'll go into detail with those. But essentially, Stalker Jacket no longer stacks, right? So if you didn't know that, go look at the patch notes. That one is already live. That update's already live. So all those things are very, very important. They have obviously influenced the meta shifts, the meta changes. And so now we got to look at, okay, well, what's next, right? We know what happened last season, right? Okay, when we're looking at specific like guilds and things like that last season, the biggest, strongest guilds last season were Pora, Escalation, Sex and Flex. Fax got stronger and stronger as the season went on, right? I know Surf was able to mass quite a bit of people, especially in the EU timers, right? So very strong in that sector too. There are a lot of different guilds that were very, very powerful last season. Obviously, you had the War, PoE, Triple X, all of that happened last season, and for the most part, what I said, actually, let's go back a little bit. When I made an episode, it was like episode 3. It was destroying the meta, right? And in that episode, it was very beginning of the season. I think actually it was like a week before the season started. And I said that the melee meta as we know it is gonna be dead most likely by the end of this season, right? And if you don't believe me, I mean, you can go check out that video. I said it in there at some point. But essentially, right? I said it's not going to be completely dead in the sense that it's going to be gone forever and it'll never come back and we'll never even see traces of it. That's not what I was saying. What I was saying was that it's going to be dead as the #1 option for every scenario, no matter what, right? And if you look at things now with the Stalker Jacket changes, the coming Demon Fang changes, right? The fact that Siege Bow is getting used more and more. Other things like Dawn Song are starting to see, the field more and more. All right, there's a lot of other options now in terms of like what you can do and how you can play. Also, at the beginning of the season, there wasn't a ton of heavy maces being played in the game, right? There wasn't a ton of heavy maces. Now, suddenly, you have a humongous shift in the metas in which every Zerg has like, on average, 2 heavy maces per party. Right? I'm not even saying 2 disengaged tanks per party. I'm saying 2 heavy maces per party on average, right? Like that's huge amounts of heavy mace. Now, don't get me wrong. Like I've played heavy mace for years, right? So I played heavy mace before anybody even said that it was even viable for ZvZ, right? So I love heavy mace. I think it's great, right? But with these meta shifts, these meta changes that are going to happen, we have to actually pay attention and look, okay, is heavy mace the best option moving forward, right? And these are the things that we're gonna have to kind of little by little look around. The truth is, I don't have all the answers, right? I have what I believe some pointers that I think are gonna be important to look at and to kind of adjust and test out, right? Like I know the Wailing Bow is gonna get it's going to get, essentially, it's going to get fixed, right? And that fix is actually going to be a lot bigger and more important to the weapon than most people think. Okay. I'm not saying it's going to be for sure meta and it's absolutely going to be like badass like it used to be, but I'm saying Wailing Bow is at least something that people should try out, right? It's worth trying out. Another one is going to be Bridal Fury, right? They're fixing the AoE escalation mechanic, which is huge, but they are reducing the overall damage that they're doing. It's by like 25% reduction in damage or something like that. But they are giving it AoE escalation. So as long as you hit at least 4 people, you're gonna come out on top anyway. So in general, the Bridal Fury might actually start seeing some good days, right? It might actually start being used more and more in the general ZvZ metas. All these things are what happened last season, what is happening right now, and what we're going to be seeing next season. Okay. What I want you guys to understand is that every single season, for the most part, metas change a little bit here and there, right? Not very often do you see significant changes literally from one season to another. Not very often does that happen. Okay. And I think that this season is going to be one of those times that is going to shift much more than the normal season changes, right? Like if you compare this last season to the season before it, there wasn't a lot of changes in the meta between them, right? It was, for the most part, it was that heavy melee burst DPS. You know, the Demon Fang was still the main thing for both seasons. Now it's not going to be, and that's the truth, right? Like Demon Fang is not going to be the #1 weapon. I'm not saying it's going to be gone forever. Personally, I wouldn't run it at any of my Zergs. That's just that simple. Like if I had the choice between running a Demon Fang and running something else like a Kingmaker, I'd run a Kingmaker all day, right? Like Demon Fang has no place in the ZvZ anymore for this season. All right, but slow changes, right? People adapt, and then some people get so used to playing Demon Fang that that's all they know, or that's what they're best at. So even though Demon Fang is not the best option in the hands of a really good Demon Fang player, that like NGM2, right, from Escalation, he's a great Demon Fang player, right? In the hands of a guy like him, Demon Fang is still going to be useful, okay? But for the most part, for the general population of people, Demon Fang is not going to be a viable option for CVZ anymore, right? So I know that breaks some hearts. I know some people are like, no, you know, I love my Demon Fang. I understand. But you know what? I told you guys this would happen from the very beginning, right? The melee meta is shifted. It is no longer going to work the way it used to. But it will take some time for people to adjust, right? So your guild leaders, your officers, your shot callers, they're going to take some time to respond and to react to the new changes. A lot of people are just sitting around waiting to see what Escalation's gonna do, or what Sex and Flex is gonna do, or what Fax is gonna do, right? Everybody's sitting back and waiting until those three, because those are the three that have announced that they're going for #1 this season, right? So we should have a lot of content this season. I hope none of them give up in less than a month. I really don't. I really hope these guys like duke it out, like, and have some like real old school warfare, man. That would be real fun. But the point is that a lot of the people in the game are just waiting to see what those three guilds are going to do in terms of this season's meta, right? And after they do that, then everybody else is going to copy them. Okay. And what I say is, I think that that's wrong. I think that you're just playing from behind if you're doing that. You're just letting your enemy choose and dictate how the meta is going to go, as opposed to you doing the hard work and effort and figuring it out and making it work yourself. Right. And I've had conversations about this many times before. Go watch the episode, the Evolving Metas episodes. There were 2 episodes. I think it was episode 1 and 2. Right. Those episodes, I talk about it a lot as to why you should make your own meta, as opposed to just copy other people's meta. So very, very important stuff that is happening right now. Tomorrow is reset day. With my current schedule, I can actually show up to NA reset. So I'll probably end up being there for NA reset. Because before I had the Saturday streams, now I don't. So I'm able to actually gonna be out there. So anyway, That's it for that talk. If you guys have any questions, as always, drop them in the chat. I am reading, I am watching. Drop them in the chat if you have any questions. Make sure you guys hit a like if you're on YouTube. It helps me a lot. Subscribe if you want to. You don't have to. The content is free, and it will stay free. But I enjoy knowing that you guys like the show enough to be able to hit that subscribe button and get the notifications and all that. I appreciate you guys. So, all right, let's get on with it. Episode 26, bait and switch. That's today's episode. We're going to talk about the strategy. All right, so just the basics of what the strategy is. Then we're going to be talking about what is the actual bait, all right, and then what is the bait response, right? So like, what are we hoping the enemy does, or what do we do if the enemy does a certain thing in response to our bait, right? And then after that, we're gonna be talking about a little bit of brain games, all right? The brain games are things about, like, you know, it's not just about executing the strategy with like the players and the skills and the positioning, but it's also about executing the strategy psychologically. All right. And it's going to be very important that we play some brain games on the enemy while we stay not allowing the enemy to play brain games on us. All right. Why? Because whoever is the one to flinch in this bait and switch strategy, whoever's the one to flinch is the one that loses. All right. We'll go over that some more later. And then at the very end, we're going to be talking about the switch, right? So bait and switch, right? So what is the switch? The switch is essentially just the actual engage, right? So that's going to be really simple. It's not going to take too much time. By the time we get there, you're going to understand the entire strategy. That's kind of just closing it up. At the very, very end after that, again, if we have time, I think we might have time. We're going to be talking about some analysis. We got videos from X-Sarge doing some of the bait and switch. We got videos from Slaya Haida also doing bait and switch. We got Dreaded Legend, King Mojo. I found a video of my own, actually, so I can put it on there as well. And then I also have another video from Africa Now, right? So all of these callers are well-known callers, except for me. I'm not very well-known, right? Unless you're watching this, then you know, I guess you know me. But that's about it, right? But everybody else on this list is pretty well-known caller, right? X-Sarge is the leader of Militant, right? They're still a very strong guild. They're around Fort Sterling. Slaya Haida is, oh, by the way, these videos are a little older, right? But they're still from callers that are well-known. So Slaya Haida is the Lonely Men, the leader of Lonely Men, and they are usually, I haven't checked recently, but I'm pretty sure they're still living down south at the very south corner of the Black Zones, southeast of Bridgewatch, right? In those 0003 UTC time zones. And they've lived there for a very, very long time. Slaya Haida is also a very good caller. Dreaded Legend, I believe he's in Escalation. He switched around many times before, but I believe he's in Escalation right now. So I know a lot of people have known him. King Mojo, obviously people have known him. He was the leader of BA for a very long time. Blue Army. So me, I mean, you want an introduction to me, you can go ahead watch episode 0. There's an introduction to me. And then Africa Now is, in my opinion, the best caller in the game right now, right? And he's fought a lot of wars. He hasn't won a lot of wars, but he's fought really hard, and he's fought a lot of time. And so when it comes to experience as a caller, he has some of the most experience that any other caller in the game playing right now has. So, you know, his experience is shown on the field. So he's another good one. So those are the people that we're going to be looking at. Again, if we can get through all of them, I hope we can. If we don't have too much time, if we can only watch a couple of them, I'll try to pick out the best ones. And so, yeah, we'll go to there. So the bait and switch strategy. All right. So the bait and switch strategy is essentially you're just baiting the enemy. Again, I already said that, right? You bait the enemy, and the goal is to get the enemy to use their full engage on your bait, right? Now, notice how I didn't say what kind of bait, right? I'm just saying that you're baiting the enemy. Well, it's like, okay, well, how do I bait the enemy? Okay, well, we're going to get to that in a second, right? So for now, all you need to understand is that the bait and switch is 2 components. It's the bait and then the switch. So the bait is all about just trying to get the enemy to use all their cooldowns on you. All right. How you accomplish that, we're going to go over that in a second. So the second part is going to be the switch, right? And that's just your counter engage. So after they do, so let's say you successfully bait them, right? Then you're going to switch it up on them. And what you're going to do is you're actually going to counter engage on them with your full force, right? Or with a big enough force to be able to kill them, right? Because when the enemy engages on you, they no longer have cooldowns, right? And if they don't have cooldowns and they were all running at you, they probably don't have boots. They probably are not paying attention. They're looking at your, at your clump to try to hit you, or they're backing up, or they're spreading, or whatever. But they're usually pretty clumped, and they're usually not ready to take a hit, right? So in that moment, you switch it up on them and you drop a counter engage on them, and that's usually going to hurt them a lot, right? This kind of strategy, the way it works, this is not a strategy that is based on the individual players, okay? This is a strategy that is based on a caller to caller strategy, all right? So what this means is that the bait and switch strategy, I don't know why this video keeps flickering. Let me see. Yeah, I think it's just the video flickering. I'm gonna put the next one so you guys are not like just watching a flickering ass video. All right, so it is a caller to caller strategy. What I'm talking about is that this does not particularly depend on the individual players to do anything special or to accomplish anything, right? This has to do with the caller. So one caller is going to try to bait the other caller to call an engage on his bait, right? If that other caller does call that engage on his bait, then the first caller calls the full counter engage, okay? Very simple, all right? So this is a caller to caller thing. So if I'm one of the callers, right? And then you, whoever's listening, you are the other caller. So I'm gonna try to bait you. And then let's say you don't take that bait. And then you go and actually bait me back, right? And then I take that bait, then suddenly I got baited by you, right? So this is a caller to caller strategy. This is psychological warfare, right? Quality sucks on this video. Hold on. So that's what essentially it's a caller to caller strategy. It doesn't necessarily have to depend on the individual players. And that's very important because there are other strategies that depend heavily on the individual players. Some strategies depend on individual players to do a lot of things, like the crescent pressure strategy, which we'll go over at some point, right? It's on a schedule. But the crescent pressure strategy, personally, I love that strategy, right? But that strategy puts a lot of responsibility on the melee DPS and the Zerg, all right? So that's very important to understand the difference between a strategy that focuses on the individual players and a strategy that focuses on the callers, right? So it doesn't mean that one is better than the other, right? At the end of the day, they are both great strategies. All these strategies are great strategies. It just comes down to execution. Who is able to do these strategies better, right? Now, what kind of uses does this strategy have? All right. Well, one of the absolute, known uses for this strategy of baiting the enemy and then hitting them is to break chokes, right? Or to break stalemates. Like let's say you engage on the enemy and then they have all their defenses up, and then the enemy engages on you and you have all your defenses up, and then you engage on them and they have their defenses up, and it's just constant like that, and nobody's dying on either side, and you just keep trading blows, but nobody's dying. And so in that situation, you want to throw a bait, right? So you throw a bait and make them waste their defensives. They drop a locust, they drop an enigmatic, and it's wasted because they didn't need to drop those things. And now suddenly, when you actually drop your main engage, your real engage, you're able to actually get kills because they don't have that locust, they don't have that enigmatic or that heal or whatever it is, okay? So that's the point. It's used to break chokes, break stalemates, even if it's an open world, okay? But it's also used to force the enemy to make mistakes. So in a sense, it's like you see the enemy coming in towards you, right? Well, you can bait them so that they can feel like, oh yeah, I can hit them for sure, right? So you bait them by engaging on them with a few people, and it makes them think that you wasted your entire engage and that you're vulnerable, right? And if the enemy thinks that you're vulnerable, then they're gonna be like, yeah, I want to kill them right now. So they're going to try to kill you, but it's actually a mistake, right? So you're using this strategy to force them to make mistakes. It might even be a mistake of position, right? So let's say you're backing up into a choke, right? You're backing up and backing up and backing up into a choke, right? And the enemy's just pushing you, and you need to get through that choke, right? But the enemy has cooldowns. And if you get to that choke and the enemy has cooldowns, they're going to delete you one shot on that choke, That's what's gonna happen. You're gonna lose. So what do? You might just turn around and bait the enemy, right? Before you get to that choke, you might turn around, bait the enemy so that the enemy wastes their cooldowns before you actually step on the choke. So instead of them hitting you with their full cooldowns while you're clumped up in a choke, they're instead going to hit you while you're spread out in an open world fashion. It makes you more able to survive the hit, as opposed to if you got hit when you're clumped up, right? So these are the things that you can do to try to make sure that the enemy makes mistakes. And the enemy a lot of times might not even realize they made a mistake, but as long as you understand how to apply this strategy in ways in which it will benefit you, that means that the enemy made a mistake. All right, so that's the point of the strategy. Now, let's actually define what is the bait, right? And I'm going to start off with the very simple one, because this is the one that everybody understands. And the reason is because everybody's using it, right? This is what I said before. This is the strategy that is most used right now. I can tell you names. Like I know Del Negro does this strategy. Dreaded Legend does this strategy. Ben Mage does this strategy. I mean, all the escalation callers do the strategy, all right? Sex and Flex. So Sakura does this strategy. What's his name now? It's Pull Up does this strategy, right? I think he's in the Citizens now, new guild. I know Archipage does this strategy, right? So what I'm saying is, like, basically every major caller in the game right now does this strategy. Africa has done this strategy many times before, right? So this strategy and the way it's employed, right, is exactly this. You go and send your first party, or not, maybe not your first party, but a party, a 20-man party, right? You say, 20-man party, whatever, right? Party 1, party 2, whatever number it is. You say party 1, engage northeast, and then they hit, and then they come back, right? Maybe they get a kill, maybe they don't, doesn't matter. And then the enemy counter engages fully with everything they have on those 20 dudes, okay? Or even they might even go deep and they might try to hit your main Zerg. It doesn't matter. You have cooldown, so you're gonna be fine. And then you put your defenses down, you're gonna be fine. You put heals down, and then you start walking into them. Now you hear the caller saying, walk into them now, walk into them now, walk into them now. Everybody else, get ready to hit them. Northeast in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then they hit them and they delete everything, right? Especially escalation, I mean, like, does this so incredibly much. And I think that's also why so many other Zergs do it, so many other callers do it, because they know that this is how escalation calls. So again, it's all about, like, you see how I mean? Everybody's always copying off each other, right? They're always copying off the top Zergs as opposed to making their own strategies. So anyway, the point is that is the one party engage, which I would call that bait. So that style of baiting, okay? The way I'm gonna call it is I'm gonna call it the small engage. All right, I'm just gonna call it that because I can't call it the one party engage, because there are some Zergs that what they do, instead of doing like a one party engage, they'll do like a bomb squad engage, right? So they'll say, hey, bomb squad, engage on them right now. And then they see their bomb squad go in, and then they're like, all right, everybody else get ready. All right, everybody else, they're countered, get ready to hit them. 3, 2, 1, and then they hit with the main Zerg, right? And you can say, oh, but that's just a bomb squad. That's not a bait. Oh, yeah, it is if you're using the bomb squad as the bait, right? Or it could be the opposite. You can actually do it where you use the main Zerg as the main as the bait engage, so that the enemy gets goes and engages on your main Zerg while your bomb squad is coming up behind them and is about to bomb the fuck out of their healers in the back, right? So then suddenly your main engage is actually the bait engage, and your actual switch, right? The switch is gonna be the bomb squads that are coming in behind them. Okay, so I know it's very complex, right? But essentially, just think about the small engage style, which is the one that everybody's understands. Okay, the simple one. Okay, the small engage style, it is a small group of your entire Zerg. All right, there's a group of people within your entire Zerg, whether that's one party, a bomb squad, 2 parties. Sometimes you have 50 people. You have 100-man Zerg, and you have 50 people on one and then 50 people on another, right? So the first 50 people to hit, that's going to be your bait, right? So essentially, the small engage is just a section of your Zerg engaging first in order to bait the enemy to use their cooldowns, and then you use the rest of your engage to be able to hit them. All right, the majority of people use only one party and then they send the rest, but everybody does a little different, but essentially they're accomplishing the same thing. It's the small engage when it comes to the bait style. All right. Now, what other styles of bait are there? All right. So you might think, okay, well, I mean, yes, we understand that that's exactly how people do it. We understand that that is exactly what happens. But what makes you think that there are other ways of baiting the enemy? Well, there are many other ways to bait the enemy. One of them is a fake engage. Now, here's one thing I'm going to say. A lot of times, and I do mean like for the most part in this game, people use the wrong words to describe things that they're seeing, okay? A fake engage is not a small engage. A small engage, like I said, it's like a one-party engage, a bomb squad engage, and then you have the rest of the Zerg engage, right? That's a small engage. A fake engage is actually where you don't use any cooldowns, okay? You might use a little bit of like your W's, your Q's, right? That kind of stuff, but you don't actually use your E's, okay? Now, the reason for it is that you might say, oh, well, if you don't use your E's, how is that going to be a bait? Well, if the enemy walks into you and starts, you know, snare charging you and shit, I mean, the snare charge is a W, right? And they start doing a bunch of like things that like, you know, are not necessarily engage, but they look like it's the preparation for an engage. Your instant reaction might be to drop that locust, right? Your instant reaction might be to drop that fallen in the front, okay? Now, that's the point of a fake engage. It can also work. Now, obviously, does it work as much as a small engage? No, because the fake engage doesn't have those E's being dropped. There's nobody actually doing damage. So like people most of the time believe an engage is actually real because they see name tags dropping or they see health bars dropping, right? Fake engage, you're not really going to see health bars dropping because you're not dropping any E's. Now, so you might say, okay, well, why the hell would anybody use a fake engage? Well, here's the thing. You got to look back at the small engage, the small engage that everybody's doing with the 20 man, all that stuff, right? So why do people use that? Well, because it works, obviously. But here's I already told you the pros of it, right? Because all baits have the pro that you're going to be able to counter on the enemy and kill them when they're off balance, right? But what's the con of running a small engage bait? So like a bait with one party engage. Well, the con is that you're splitting your damage, right? If you have, you know, in a 100-man Zerg, you have, I don't know, you have 6 DPS, like actual raw DPS, not like Pierces or anything, like 6 like raw DPS players on your party, right? So like, and you have 5 parties, you have like 30 DPS, okay? Well, you're gonna go and use 6 of them, right? You're gonna go and use 6 of them, of that 30, to go and engage without the rest of the Zerg. That's like 20% of your, unless my math is fucked up right now, but that's like 20% of your total damage output that you literally just, in a way, wasted. Now, if those guys got kills, then that's fucking great, right? That's awesome. But if they didn't get kills, then suddenly you did just waste 20% of your firepower for the bait. Now, it might be worth it because the enemy's gonna bite, and then the 80% of your Zerg is gonna be able to capitalize and get those kills, and it might be worth it, right? But this is also why a lot of times you see Zergs like Escalation, and the reason I pick on Escalation so much is simply because they are the best Zerg in the game right now, right? So whenever somebody else becomes the best Zerg in the game, I'll be picking on them, all right? It's just that simple. We always punch up, not down, all right? So I've seen Escalation many times before where they engage and they engage and they engage and they engage and they never kill anybody. And then slowly over time, they lose one person, they lose another, they lose another, they lose another. And 2 minutes into the fight, they're completely wiped. Why? Because they couldn't get critical mass because they were splitting their damage too much, right? Now, that doesn't happen as often as you know, when Escalation actually does go and kill and run people over, obviously, right? Because they're that good, right? But my point is that it does happen, and that's the point, is because they are splitting their damage. Okay, so what does the fake engage have a strength in? Remember, we said the drawback, the bad thing about using a fake engage, where you don't actually drop any E's at all, okay? That bad part of that is that it reduces the chances that the enemy's gonna counter on it, okay? Because they're not gonna see any health bars dropping, so they're gonna maybe hold their W, hold their E, hold their, you know, demon armor, whatever it might be, right? They might just hold it, okay? Whereas with a small engage, when you use that 20% of your firepower, you are gonna drop some name tags a little bit, and that's going to be enough for people to pop their defensive. So it's more likely for enemies to waste their defensives and to be quote unquote baited by the bait if you use a small engage. Whereas with a fake engage where you don't use your E's, you don't have that. However, if it works, right? If it works and the enemy does get baited by your fake engage, then suddenly you have 100% of your firepower ready to go. Right? So if you bait the enemy with a fake engage and don't use your E's, and the enemy gets baited and they hit you and you pop your defenses and you're fine, suddenly when you're gonna do a return hit on them, when you're gonna actually fire back and do that counter engage on them, then what's gonna happen is that you're gonna be able to hit them at full 100% strength. Whereas with the other strategy, you only have 80% of the strength, right? So it depends on what you prefer. Do you prefer the enemy to be baited more easily? Or do you prefer to be able to have more firepower, right? That's all it comes down to. It's a different kind of strategy for baiting. But there are other ways to bait the enemy, all right? So one of the ways, and this is the way that I personally prefer, when I do this strategy, this is the way I prefer to do the engage, okay? Is I don't like doing fake engages because I feel like the chances of enemies not taking the bait is way too high for me. All right, I prefer the enemy to fucking take the bait, but at the same time, I really don't like not having 100% of my firepower ready to go, right? So how can I get best of both worlds? And this is what I do. Okay, this is what I prefer. Now I'm not saying this is the best. I'm saying this is my preferred strategy. Okay, what I prefer to do, and this is the third style, is you're gonna do a full engage, but it's gonna be a shallow engage. What do I mean by that? So you're gonna use your entire Zerg to just hit the front line of the enemy and come right back, right? You're not gonna go deep into the enemy. You're just gonna hit the front. You're just gonna hit 2-3 guys in the front, maybe get a kill, maybe not. It doesn't matter. Just hit somebody in the front and then come right back and get away from the enemy. Why? Because you are actually going to use your cooldown. So you are actually vulnerable, right? So if the enemy doesn't counter engage on that, then I don't know what the fuck they're waiting for. Because the point of them waiting is for you to not have your cooldowns. So if I go and I engage complete engage onto them, but I only engage the front line and instantly come right back, right? Then what's gonna happen is I'm gonna create distance, but the enemy's gonna know for an absolute fact that I completely used all my cooldowns. So what they're going to do is they're going to try to go and full engage on me, but I'm pulling back. So what I'm counting on with this strategy is that while they're trying to engage on me, they're popping their sprints, and by the time their sprint ends and their full engage ends, I can pop defenses and I'll be fine. And then now they're right in front of me, and we're both literally right in front of each other, and I'm gonna have cooldowns first, right? So instead of making it like a 1-2 punch, I'm actually doing a full hit, and then I'm waiting for the next cooldown cycle. But what I'm doing to mitigate the problems is that I'm not actually going to expose myself by going deep into the enemy or overstaying. No, I'm just gonna hit the front and come right back. Right now, give me a second here. I'll be right back. All right, I'm back. All right, I got family, man. I got family. Got to deal with children. You know, everything good though. Everything good. All right, so where was it? Yeah, so the full shallow engage. All right, so the full shallow engage, that's essentially what it is. Okay, you're just gonna engage. You're just gonna engage the very front, and you're gonna come right back. Okay, now what is the drawback of the full shallow engage? Because there obviously is. Everything has a positive and a negative, right? The positive is that I'm gonna have my full engage. And the other positive is that I'm also going to ensure that the enemy gets baited, right? The negative is that I'm taking a big risk in comparison to using only one party, or in comparison to not engaging with anybody, right? Doing a complete fake engage. I'm actually completely risking my entire Zerg because I am making my Zerg vulnerable, right? So that's basically the positives and negatives of each individual bait tactic, all right? Now, there's one last bait style, okay? There's one last bait style. Now, this last bait style is a very complex one because it doesn't necessarily have a timer, okay? What I mean by that is that you can't necessarily call it, right? It's kind of something that you just do and then you wait for the enemy's response. What you do with the last style is what I call a pressure bait, okay? A pressure bait is literally you start walking towards the enemy and then you walk inside of the enemy and you start using Qs and Ws and auto attacks onto the enemy. And you force the enemy to do something about it, right? Because you're getting inside of them and you're doing a lot of damage with Qs, Ws, auto attacks, okay? And it's gonna force them to basically try to shove you off, right? Because if they can't shove you off, you're gonna continue to do a lot of damage inside of them with Qs, Ws, and auto attacks. As you can imagine, this strategy is best employed when you have damage over time, such as things like halberds and stuff like that, right? But essentially, if you're able to do that, you don't have to use your E's because you're doing enough damage with Qs, Ws, and auto attacks that you're putting enough pressure on the enemy that they're going to want to push you away. How are they going to want to push you away? By doing a full engage on you. So when they do full engage on you, you're going to pop your defenses and everything, and then you're going to counter engage on them. And again, that's a bait and switch. It's classic bait and switch. This is actually one of the most classic bait and switch strategies. It's just not used much anymore because people don't do a lot of damage over time weapons nowadays, right? But this is the more classic bait and switch strategy, all right? So that's the 4 of them, right? So one of them is one party engage, just like the majority of Zerg's doing right now. It's one party engage and then you engage with the rest of the Zerg. The positive of that strategy is that the enemy is very likely to get baited, right? The negative of that strategy is that you're going to only have 80%, about 80% of your Zerg, or maybe even less, right, of your Zerg DPS to be able to hit the enemy on the counter engage. The next one is the fake engage. The fake engage is when you go and you don't actually use any E's, you just auto attack them, QW, whatever. You fake it, especially with tanks, and you walk back, right? With that fake engage, you have the negative that very few people, very few Zergs actually will get baited by it. But on the positive side, you'll have your full cooldowns ready to go. So that's 100% damage, right? The third one is the full shallow engage. The full shallow engage is that you engage with your entire Zerg, but you only engage the very front line and you come right back. Okay. And by the way, I'm not the only one that likes doing this. There are many other callers that have done this, this other one. Okay. The full shallow engage. I know I actually saw a video of Noob Slayer right before the season ended. He did exactly this, an entire fight straight. He literally did exactly this fucking bait, right? And he just did it over and over and over and he won the fight. So it works. Anyway, so you engage the front, you come right back. The negative is that you're making your Zerg vulnerable, right? Because you actually use your E's. So you're making your Zerg vulnerable. The positive is that you're going to have cooldowns, right? You're going to have your full cooldowns, the 100% damage like you would with a fake engage. The last one is the pressure bait. Pressure bait is you just walk into them QW and you nonstop put a lot of pressure on them, damage pressure with Qs and Ws, auto attacks. And that forces the enemy to respond by doing a full engage on you, which then you have your full E's to counter engage on them. All right. So that's the 4 strategies of bait. I want to make sure I go over them in detail because everything that we're going to go over now is going to basically fall in line with one of those strategies, right? And we're going to be able to see how the enemy responds. So that's going to be the next thing right now is what the bait response actually is. So what are the possible things that the enemy can do in response to your bait? So if you bait the enemy can full engage on you, right? So if they full engage on you after you bait them, which whatever bait you did, okay, they full engage on you, then what you need to do is you need to proceed with the switch, right? So what's the switch? You do a full counter on them. Perfect, great. Now, what if the enemy doesn't actually full engage on you and instead they do a small engage, meaning a one party engage, right? Or what if they do a bait of their own? Let's say you try to fake engage them and then they try to full shallow engage you, right? Both of those are fakes, right? Though both of those are baits, I should say. They're both baits. So what if you do a bait on the enemy and then the enemy does a bait back at you in response? What does that mean? That means that the enemy caller is looking to bait you as well. So you should try to hang back and reset. You shouldn't go and try to go and full engage on them. And the reason you shouldn't is because if you bait first and then they bait, you counter engage. You're only counter engaging on their bait, which means that when they counter engage after that, they're going to hit the rest of your Zerg. Okay, so you're actually going to be the one being baited. Now, if you're the one to be baited, okay, if the enemy's baiting you and you bait them back, right? They engage on you with one party and then you engage with one party. The next thing is going to be they're going to engage with the rest of their Zerg. And when they engage with the rest of their Zerg, then you engage them with the rest of your Zerg. And this exact thing that happens, what I literally just explained right now, right? This is literally what happens in like 70% of the fights right now. All right, in the game, well, I mean the higher level fights. Okay, I'm not talking about like the average fights of the game. I'm talking about the higher level fights in the game right now. That is like 70% of the things that happen all the fucking time. All right, so essentially, it's all about understanding who is trying to bait who, and who's actually going to have the cooldown rotation to be able to counter the enemy effectively. All right, now what if the enemy does a full shallow engage? Like I said, right? Well, the enemy's relying on his disengaged tanks. Okay. They're relying on his disengaged tanks to be able to peel you off, right? Because they're trying to get distance with you. They did a full shallow engage. What's the next thing they're going to do? They're going to back up. Okay. But if they back up, inevitably, they're going to leave one or two guys behind, right? So what you can do is that you can switch onto just that one or two guys that they left behind. And that's another strategy that I've seen a lot of callers employ. And it works really well because you get to take out usually their best tanks, because their best tanks are usually the last ones to leave the field. Right? So their best tanks are going to be the ones that you end up getting caught in that situation, right? Now, what if the enemy does a pressure bait on you, right? Like let's say you go and try to bait them and the enemy does a pressure bait on you, okay? Then the enemy caller 100% knows that you tried to bait him, okay? And now they're trying to press you to force you to commit to your switch. Right? Because if you already used your first cooldown, your first party engage, then you are very likely to full engage on the enemy if the enemy starts walking into you, right? So suddenly a pressure bait becomes really high percentage chance of working. Okay. So what you need to do is that you should not engage them. All right. If you use your bait engage and the enemy just walks into you, you need to back the fuck up, because otherwise you're gonna lose that engagement unless you can get a shitload of kills in the very first engage, which is not likely because the enemy's gonna have their defensives, right? Now, unless they have shitty ass supports and all that, then okay, that's a whole different story. I'm talking about evenly matched Zergs here, right? So generally speaking, you're not gonna be able to kill enough of the enemy. If the enemy is good enough with their supports and their defensives and their healers, you won't be able to kill them enough where when they go and actually counter engage you, you're gonna be dead. Right? Now, the last option that the enemy has, if you bait them, okay, if you bait the enemy, they do nothing, right? They absolutely just don't respond. They just heal their guys and then they move on with their life, right? Well, then what you need to do is that, well, guess what? Your bait didn't work. That's okay. Just wait. Just wait. Wait until your guys have cooldowns and then try it again, right? And I'll talk a little bit more about that specific situation more later, because especially at the highest levels of ZvZ, the callers get so good that they're able to understand each other's baits, okay? If you kind of want a reference to what I'm talking about, look up some of Escalations versus Pora's fights this last season, right? Season, what was it, 19, right? Season 19. Look at Escalation and Porous fights from season 19, and you're gonna see, like, when they fight against each other, not when they're fighting against everybody else, when they're fighting against each other, and you're gonna see and you can hear the comms, man. They're literally going through the motions. They're like, all right, we're gonna first party engage, and then it's like, all right, let's see what they do. All right, they're engaging. All right, hold. It was only their first party. It was only the first party. Hold, right? And it's like suddenly everything slows down again because everybody's resetting, because the callers both understand that they're trying to bait each other, right? And so it becomes a thing of like, well, who's gonna actually be the first one to make the mistake, right? Who's gonna bite on that bait first, right? So that's essentially what it is. So I'll talk a little bit more about it as to what you should do, all right? But essentially in that situation, the enemy caller knows that it's a bait, and so you should just back up and chill for a minute. So that's it for the bait responses, right? The next thing up that we have is the brain games, all right? Now, the brain games, there's a lot of little things here that we can talk about with brain games, but essentially, one of the things that you want to try to do when you're baiting the enemy, usually you want to spread your damage as much as possible, okay? The point of a bait engage is not to get kills. Okay, and now you can say, oh, but this guild goes and gets kills all the time on their bait engage. Yeah, that's because they're fucking good, right? Or because your Zerg sucks and didn't stop them. That's probably the reason, to be honest. But the truth is that the majority of the time that you're going to do a bait engage, and I do mean like the high majority of the time you do a bait engage, it's just not going to work, okay? It's just not going to work. Like, you're not going to actually get kills, right? And so what I'm talking about is, instead of focusing on trying to get kills with that first party engage or whatever it is, instead of doing that, just know that it's a bait and actually just try to get as much damage off on the enemy as possible in a wide area. Why is it important to get as much damage off in a wide area? Because if the enemy sees, you know, a group of 5 people drop to 20% HP, they are less likely to counter engage on that than if they see like 30 people drop to 70% HP. Right? They're gonna see the damage across the entire Zerg, entire front line, and they're gonna be like, okay, this must have been a real engage, right? So spread the damage as much as possible. It's better to spread the damage and kill nobody than it is to try to focus on a couple, try to kill 1 or 2, and then ultimately the bait doesn't work, right? Now, next thing is, you want to also sometimes try to feign a retreat. What I mean by that is, after the bait, right, you want to act as if you're retreating, okay? Like, let's say you go and engage with your first party, okay? And then you engage them, and now you start backing up. Just back up. Literally just a little bit. Not a lot. Obviously, you're not running away, okay? But you want to back up a little bit. Why? Because if you engage and then you back up instantly, the enemy caller is going to see that and think, oh, this must have been a real engage. That's why they're backing up, because they just used all their cooldowns, so they're vulnerable. So that's why they're backing up, right? That's what you want them to think. But actually, you're not vulnerable. You have cooldowns. You have everything ready. But you're trying to make them think that you are actually retreating or backing up because you're worried about their counter engage, right? Now, another thing is that you can establish a facade, right? So if you full engage the enemy, like if you actually full engage the enemy, whether this is the switch or whether this is a full shallow engage, okay? If you full engage the enemy and don't get many kills or you don't get much damage done, another thing you can do is act like that entire engage was a fake and you still have cooldowns. So how can you act like that? How can you act like, oh, no, that was a fake. Don't worry about it. Don't engage me because I totally have cooldowns, right? How can you make the enemy think that that was not a real engage? Well, the way you can do it is by simply holding your ground and acting like you're ready to fucking counter engage them if they hit you, right? Now, this is obviously very, very dangerous, okay? But especially for inexperienced callers, this shit works so well. Inexperienced callers, if you don't back up, that inexperienced caller will not engage on you, right? So even if you full engage and you just stand there, that enemy caller is not going to engage on you, Okay, and I've seen this a million times, especially with arch callers, right? Like I know I've seen it when with what is it? War Gods was fighting Arch, right, over there in the West last season, or actually it was like 2 seasons ago. Yeah, like so often War Gods would full engage and the caller wouldn't call counter engage, simply because War Gods wouldn't back up, right? So that's another thing that you can do to kind of play brain games with this bait strategy, right? Another one is you want to try to set the enemy up for a future bait and switch. Okay, so how can you set the enemy up for a future bait and switch? So what you can do is go do a first party engage and then come back and then wait and then don't do anything, right? Maybe they counter engage you, maybe they don't. It doesn't matter. Don't do anything. Just chill, right? And then in a few seconds, do it again, right? Hit them again, but then don't do anything, right? And then after you do this a couple times, the enemy caller is gonna start thinking that that's your full engage and that's all you got. That's all the damage you have, right? So they're gonna start getting cocky and they're gonna start trying to full push you. They're gonna put themselves in bad situations simply because they think that you don't have the power to kill them. And so when they finally go and come out of their defensive position, they try to push a choke on you or whatever it is, okay? When they finally do that, then you show them the entire rest of the Zerg that you weren't using in that entire engagement, right? And so what you can do sometimes is you'll have, like, let's say you have 3 parties in your Zerg, right? You'll have first party engage, right? And then you wait, and then you'll have like second party engage, right? And then you wait, and then you'll have third party engage, and then you just keep cycling them, right? And so after you do that a little bit, then reset everybody's cooldowns and then do it again. And I promise you that enemy caller is gonna think that his defensives are strong enough to hold your full engage. But it's because you have actually split your engage so much. You have actually baited the enemy so much that the enemy no longer knows what is a safe maneuver against you and what is not, right? So again, brain games, right? You're fucking with the enemy caller's ability to understand what is actually happening in the fight. Okay. Now, the last thing in brain games that I wanna go over is that you want to make the enemy kind of second guess everything. Okay. And by that, I mean that even if you're fighting against a larger enemy, okay, play aggressively. All right, play aggressively. And the reason for it is because if you play aggressively in general for this entire bait and switch strategy, right? If you play aggressively, what will usually happen is that the baits are gonna feel a lot more real, simply because you're constantly pushing the enemy. So when you're constantly running on the enemy's not gonna understand what is a full engage and what is not. Okay, so that is very, very important for you know, understanding how this bait and switch strategy works out. This is also why right now a lot of people run this bait and switch strategy, is because a lot of people play very aggressively. Okay, fights don't last too long nowadays. Even like cluster queue fights, they end in like less than 5 minutes. You know, 2 years ago, a cluster queue fight would literally last 20, 30, 40 minutes sometimes. Okay, now they don't even last 10 minutes, not like legit less than 10 minutes. The reason is because everybody's playing so incredibly aggressively, and playing aggressively actually makes sense with the bait and switch strategy. So it all works out in that aspect. That's also why people do that aggressive playstyle. All right. So now we're essentially just going to talk about like what the actual switch is. You know, I told you guys in the beginning, you guys will probably understand where all this is going and how it works and everything by this point, right? Essentially, the switch is your actual engage. Okay. It's where you actually go and engage on the enemy. And it's usually better to use that full engage onto the center of the enemy. And I say usually because obviously situations are different sometimes, but for the most part, when you do a bait and switch, you usually want to hit the center. And the reason for it is because if you are able to make a lot of kills in the center of the enemy, it'll usually be able to break their front line. It'll break the enemy's morale. People will start running away. People won't be doing the healing. People won't be doing the supports. And that's where you can really challenge the enemy, right? So in a bait and switch, you have a really good chance. If the enemy gets baited, you have a really strong chance of actually killing the enemy a lot, right? So where do you want to kill the enemy? Like what area do you want to hit their back line? Well, not really, because if you hit their back line, you might be overextending yourself. So usually you just want to hit the very front, not like the very first two guys. I mean, you want to go a little deeper than that, but you want to hit the middle and you want to hit the front, right? Now, another thing is, I did an episode about 2 weeks ago. It was, or actually it was a little bit more than that, because we took a break. But anyway, it was like episode 24 or episode 23. It's called ZvZ Flow. All right. If you haven't seen that episode, ZvZ Flow, I encourage you guys to watch that. It's a very important episode because it teaches you everything that you need to know about how fights go back and forth. Okay. Now, ZvZ Flow, we talked about the 20-second rule. All right. So if you do a bait and switch, just remember the 20-second rule. Okay. What I mean by that is if you do the bait and switch, you engage with your first party, and then the enemy gets baited, and then you counter engage on them with the rest of your Zerg. Remember, the enemy already used their cooldowns, so they will have their cooldowns in less than 20 seconds at that point. Okay, so you can push on the enemy, press the advantage, right? You got the bait and switch happen. You got a good hit. That's great. Now press the advantage, push them. Use Qs and Ws, auto attacks, but make sure that before those 20 seconds are up, you are backing up and spreading out, because otherwise you're gonna die, right? Now, another thing is make sure that you spread right after the switch, okay? Every time that we engage in general, we're going to clump, okay? It's just going to happen inevitably because we always hit the same clump for the most part, right? So you're going to clump, and that's okay, but it's not okay to stay clumped. And so what you need to understand is that if your caller is calling in a bait engage style, then what you need to do is that bait and switch style. The bait and switch style is what you need to do is that after they do the switch, after you actually engage, you need to make sure you spread out, take as much space to absorb the next enemy engage, okay? Because otherwise, if you stay clumped, you're gonna get baited yourself. All right. So that's pretty much it. Don't fall too far behind in bait and switches, okay? Because it's very easy to be like, oh no, well, he only said first party engage and I'm second party, so I'm just gonna stay all the way back here. Don't do that. You gotta be looking at the front. You gotta be paying attention, because you gotta see when the enemy is gonna engage so that you can see when the actual engage is gonna come in. Also, if the enemy doesn't full engage, then you're gonna know that your caller is probably not gonna call that full engage. Now, give me 1 second here. Gotta drink some water, man. All right. That was a lot. All right. You know what? We have time, though. We have time. I don't know how many of these videos we're going to go over, but we have a few videos that we can go over. We'll start with... let's start with Sarge's video here. And by the way, if you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them in the chat right now.
Up here, sit, kill the guard.
All right, so I think I can make it full screen here. Yeah. All right. So this is Militant, right? This is Sarge calling. So I want you guys to listen to the calls.
All right, stay away from the wall, please. Don't let me tell you again.
Help Skrill.
Guys, help Skrill up front. Skrill needs help up front.
Heals on Skrill. Listen, we're gonna fake this.
All right, so you listen to that, right? He said, listen, we're gonna fake this, right? So it's one of the strategies that I was telling you about. A fake, again, is when you go into the enemy and you try to bait them to counter engage on you, but you don't actually use any of your cooldown, any of your E's, okay?
Brooder, let's go. Debunker 3, 2, 1. Yo, fake this down, fake this down, fake this down.
Now, the problem here is that the majority of the Zerg didn't follow the call, right? The Zerg should have walked up here as if it was a full engage, right? They should have walked east up here as if it was a full engage, but they didn't. Instead, they stayed back. All right, so they didn't really work with the caller here. But either way, I think what Sarge does sometimes is that he'll have one of his clump tanks actually get a clump. So like he'll have like a Hodge, or he'll have like a one-handed mace or Witchwork, or Juggernaut, something like that, right? And he'll use that as the fake engage.
Pick this down, 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 and come back, come back, come back, come back, come back. See if they're gonna engage here.
So see, now he's waiting to see if they're gonna counter engage, right? Because the enemy right now, the enemy caller is probably thinking like, oh, like, was that a real engage? Did we stop them? Like, was that an actual engage and our D-tank stopped the enemy, or did they just not actually engage and it was just a fake?
Nope. All right, fuck it.
But then suddenly, here comes the enemy, right? And again, this is what happens, right? It is like callers who are not as good, right? Like the enemy here, okay? They will take some time to react, to take the bait, right? So even though this seems like, oh no, this wasn't like a response to it, it absolutely was. It's just that they're just very slow with their calls here.
Yo, back up, back up. Heals on this, heals on this, heals. Here they come. Okay, listen, yo, we're gonna counter on this. Fuck it, with shallow with 3, 2, 1, on the jug, on the jug, on the jug, on the.
So see, now he actually switched it up here, and what he's doing now is he's countering, but he's doing a shallow engage, right? So he's actually doing instead of doing a full counter, because I want you guys to pay attention to what happened here. Let's go back a little bit. The engage that the enemy did was right here in the very center where Sarge is. Right? Look at that, right? And then they don't actually go deep. Look how they don't really cross this line too much. They go in, they hit, and they come back.
Back up. Heals on this, heals on.
See that? Nobody over here gets damaged at all.
Here they come. Okay, listen.
So because of this, Sarge at this point knows, oh, hey, these guys are actually engaging shallow, which means that they might actually be baiting my bait. And remember, that's what I was telling you guys, right? Is that you kind of got to look at the bait on the bait and see who's actually being baited first.
Yo, we're gonna counter on this bucket with shallow with 3, 2, 1, on the jug, 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 on the jug. Delete the fucking on the jug. Yo, give me defensives out, give me defensives out, give me defensives out.
All right, so he's coming back, and now they're doing the switch on their side, right? So see, that was a bait from Sarge, and then the enemy baited, and now Sarge did his switch, and now the enemy's doing their switch.
Give me defensives out, give me defensives out, defensives out. Now hold this, now hold this, now hold this, now hold this. We're gonna go back in on cooldown.
So you see now, so here's the thing. Sarge did a bait, and then he did a shallow and a full engage shallow. Remember, that is also another kind of bait. So what Sarge did is he baited, the enemy baited, and then Sarge did a full shallow engage, which also is a bait, right? The enemy full engaged right now, and they had all the defensives up. So now, who has the cooldown? Well, it should be Militant. Militant now has the full cooldowns before the enemy. Yes, they have cooldowns. They'll have like 10 seconds, 15 seconds from this point, but it doesn't matter because Militant's going to have the cooldowns first.
Yo, come back, come back, come back. Don't overextend here, boys. Yeah, keep hitting this fucking tank.
Sure. Kill this guy, like this.
Yeah, I don't know what happens after this. I only put the video for up to this moment. But essentially, I wanted to show you guys how that works, right? The bait, and then the switch, and then the bait again. And instead of doing a switch, you can actually do another bait after that, right? So instead of like how Sarge did there, instead of doing a bait and then a switch, he did a bait, and then he actually switched it up, right? So you have to pay attention to when the enemy's baiting you, and what you do in response to that is gonna determine in reality who's gonna be able to get that better hit off. And in this scenario, Militant got like 10 kills and the enemy didn't get a single kill. So that on its own, that entire engagement back and forth essentially turned out well for Militant and not well for the enemy. All right, so another one that we're gonna watch here is with Slayahada, or Slayahada, however you say it.
Hold it. I'm coming to you.
I didn't put the time on this one.
Blacklist is in the tunnel. I'm gonna face them, I think. 4, 3, 2, I'm faking each northeast, faking each northeast, faking each. Give it to your tank.
Oh, there it is. All right, so listen to the comms.
You're faking each northeast here in 5, 4.
So he said we're faking northeast here, right?
3, 2, 1, fake engage northeast, fake engage northeast, fake engage northeast, fake engage northeast. Back up southwest, back up southwest. Fuse numbers in the beetle, fuse numbers.
So he faked an engage. Now the rest of his Zerg was too far back, right? But his Zerg didn't actually use any cooldown. So again, this is an actual fake engage. This is not a small engage. This is not a full engage shallow. This is not a pressure bait, obviously. This is just a fake engage, right? No cooldowns were used.
Fuse numbers in the beetle, fuse numbers in the beetle and behemoth, fuse numbers in the beetle and behemoth. Fuse numbers on the behemoth, behemoth. Yo, tanks, don't go over extend here. Yo, full engage on the behemoth, full engage on the behemoth. 3, 2, 1, full engage on the behemoth, full engage on the behemoth, full engage on the behemoth. Good. Hold this choke. Fuck, the bruiser's only on its choke. Hold here. We're gonna only have to leave the front line, so I'm gonna need aggressive GA on this, okay? We have enough defenses, so I'll need aggressive GA.
All right, so listen what he's saying, right? He's saying, we have enough defenses, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that. He's preparing his team, right? He's telling them, listen, this is what I'm thinking, this is what we're gonna do. We have enough defensives to survive their counter engage, right? That's exactly what he's trying to say. I mean, he's not saying it in so many words, but that's what he's talking about, right? He's saying, we have enough defenses where we can actually survive the enemy counter engage. So therefore, we're going to try to bait them with a full engage. I think that's what's going to happen. By the way, I wrote this episode months ago, and I don't actually remember what happens directly on this video. So that's what I think is going to happen based on what I'm hearing, right? So I'm watching it with you guys. We're watching this shit together.
Thanks, don't go up, thanks.
I'll hammer to go guard room.
Yeah, guard bases. Help your front line tanks, that are overextending. Please help your tanks that are overextending. I just literally said that's all they do, man. Heal down. Guys, do not overextend. They will full engage onto you, please, man. That's all they do. That's what Blacklist specializes in, just deleting tanks. Come southwest, let them come in. Heal down, to the front. Look northeast here in 5. Shallow northeast, 4 on the...
So there you go. So he's doing a full engage, right? The enemy hit, and I want you guys to pay attention. Let's go back.
What Blacklist specializes in, just...
Watch what happens.
Deleting tanks.
So here comes the enemy. Let's count them, right? Let's count them. We got, I saw, there's a red in here somewhere. I don't see them, but there's a red in here somewhere. Then there's another one, 2, 3, 4, 5.
West, let them come in.
6, 7.
Heal down, to the front. Look northeast here in 5.
I see about 7 people engaged on that, right? And look at how much damage they did, okay? Right? What is that? The enemy Blacklist here, they just did a small engage, right? They probably did a first party engage or maybe a bomb squad engage, right? But they did a bait engage. That's what they did. Now, what is Slayer going to do about this? Is he going to counter engage full against it? Well, he actually is, but he's calling for a shallow engage. Remember, that's also a bait. So what we're seeing is Blacklist did a bait. Slayer Hater recognized that it's a bait. Right, and again, this is how you can tell who's a good caller and who's not. Is the callers that are able to recognize what's a real bait and what is not, and what the proper response to it is. That's all very, very important. So Slayer here is gonna call his own bait because of that.
5, shallow northeast, 4 on the tanks, 3, 2, 1 on the tanks, the front line tanks, back up.
See, frontline tanks, right? Frontline tanks, and instantly he turns around and he's like, back up now, right? He doesn't care about the kills. Like, if you look at the name tags, there's not a single guy dead, right? He doesn't care about the kills. He cares to bait the enemy. And that's what he did. Now he's getting out.
Back up to the west, me all defensive, back up to the west. Judy down, demons come southwest, and he tanks stopping them. Stoppers now, heal the front, help your tanks.
And it looks like Backless is gonna take the bait. Let's see. They're coming in.
Help your tanks.
So now we see 1, 2, 3, 4, a beetle going very deep. That should be a symbol right there, right? This beetle going so deep, that should tell you it's probably real. But let's see, let's give it another couple seconds.
The full 14 here, these 5 demons.
All right, so they're coming across and they're hitting, but look at the damage. Not a lot of damage. Not much is coming out. Let's give it another second.
Demons.
Okay, not much. And now you see a gap over here. You see this gap? That gap 100% tells you this is a bait. Why? Because there are people who are not willing to cross. They're not going to cross the choke right now. There are a lot of people who are not crossing the choke right now, because otherwise this gap wouldn't exist. All these guys would be walking straight southwest here, right? So you see a gap like this in between their Zerg, that 100% tells you this is a bait.
Heal down, absorb this, we're gonna counter again in northeast in 10 seconds. Okay, boys,
so now he knows the enemy just baited him, and now he's going to bait again. Or maybe he's actually going to full push. Let's see.
They don't defenses. Fusion W's, come southwest here, fake engage northeast here in 5, faking.
Oh, there it is, fake engage, right? He's back to the fake engage, right? Again, no use cooldowns. Let's bait them.
Engage 4, fake engage 3, 2, 1, fake engage northeast, fake engage northeast. Now back up to the west, 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 back up to the west.
And now look at all these name tags moving west. You see all this? I want you guys to pay attention to this. This is very important. All these name tags looking west now. They're moving west.
Back up to the west, back up to the west, back up to the west. Make sure to mark me, make sure to mark me.
And they pulled back east a little bit. Okay, maybe it's nothing, but let's see.
Thanks, come back, come back, pull back, pull back, pull back, pull back. Yo, I want my Rodix, go for
No, they stay back. They stay back.
engage HOJ here. My party fake. I want Phil party, so last party to engage with me to make it look believable. Okay, so we're gonna fake engage.
All right, so look, he's switching it up. By the way, this is another tell of a good caller, right? Is somebody recognizing that what they're doing is not working and then switching it up mid-fight, okay? What Slaya is doing right now is he's now saying, okay, we're not going to do a fake engage. We're actually going to do a small engage. We're going to have one party engage.
Engage here in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Fake engage northeast, fake engage northeast, fake engage northeast. Probably engage on the tanks here. Tanks going deep. Do not go deep. Do not go deep. They're going to probably put the party back up to the west, back up to the west, back up to the west, back up to the west. You're probably going to go for... Yeah, I might, Razin, I need you to spike gauntlet them, okay? Hold this, you're gonna put the front line, they're gonna hit the front line tanks here soon. I feel it. Yo, Razin, full engage with me on the northeast here. Everyone fake engage, Razin, you engage, okay? Look northeast shell in 5.
We're gonna see one more engage and then we'll switch to another video.
4 on the tank. 3, 2, 1. Fake engage northeast, fake engage northeast, fake. Back to the west, back up to the west, back up to the west, back up to the west. The bomb hit you, boys. The bomb hit you there, Heals down, base spread. They got a lot of kills with the range CPS. Come southwest here, The range CPS got a lot of kills there on the east. Damn, that's okay. That's fast.
So that was just bad defenses by the Lonely Men here. All right, let's switch up. But essentially, I wanted you guys to see the bait and switch tactics being used back and forth. We're gonna watch a video now from Dreaded Legend calling. Dreaded Legend calling.
Don't cross it, don't cross it.
Dropping glance. Don't
cross it, get ready, spread east. Spread east, pull them in.
Let's
3, 2, 1. West side on the bridge, shallow on the bridge, shallow.
So there you go, right? You hear that? Shallow on the bridge, right? He's hitting the enemy west shallow on the bridge. That means that he's doing a full engage, but he's doing a full shallow engage, right? What I expect him to do is probably back up a little bit, let the enemy through the choke a little bit, and then when he has his cooldowns back up again, he's going to be able to counter on that and hit that really hard.
On the bridge. Nice. Now, all defensive takes hold them. Dropping nurture rings on the bridge now.
So he's actually choosing to hold the choke with his tanks.
Nurture rings on the bridge now, okay? We'll hold. Yeah, they're going to come back up east.
Okay.
No, I don't think they're going to come after that. They lost so many after that, dude. What's their debuff? Yeah, they're not going to come after that, okay? Heals up front. Okay, now come east out. Everybody pop a sprinties. We need to take open water if we can, okay? Pop a sprinties. Everyone should be able to mount up. Mount up. Oh, are they...
I have no idea what they're doing here.
Dismount on the bottom of the hill, Walk in northwest. Yeah, they should be straight west of us. Okay, get ready. Walk in west. My party will look deep west south.
All right, so look, he switched it up, right? So now we've seen Sarge switching it up, right? We've seen Slaya Hada switching it up. Now we're seeing Dreaded Legend switching it up, right? Dreaded Legend did a full shallow engage, and even though it worked, he's now doing he has a different scenario, it's a different angle, it's a different fight at this point, basically, right? Now he's looking at the enemy west, and what is he saying? My party, get ready to engage west. He's doing a small engage now with a one party engage as opposed to doing a full engage again this time.
Now deep south 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Give me defensive south south. My party south, okay? Go back east down the hill. Get ready.
So his party engaged, but they didn't really do anything, and the enemy's not being baited because of that. However, he has so much pressure. This is actually going to act like a pressure engage. Even though he did a small engage bait, that's not what's actually happening. What's actually going to happen is that I think Noob Slayer, he's back here on the west. I think he's going to be baited by the fact that there's so much pressure that escalation here is farther west here.
Get ready. Demon armor's out on the southeast side.
Yeah, and there it is. They're going to come in. Yeah, so that actually, honestly, it kind of looked like a one-party engage from Pora there, right? So if I were Dreaded Legend here, I wouldn't go deep engage. I would probably hit just shallow. I would do a full engage for sure, but I'd do shallow and I'd pull back straight east because that damage was a little too low for my liking. And I know that the damage was kind of split up here in the northwest, and some of it was down here. And I know that it was split, right? But I don't know. It just, because if you're the one, if you think that you're switching it on the enemy and it's actually you being baited, that price you're gonna pay is gonna be tough. So let's see what happens here.
3, 2, 1. Main circle, west out, main circle, west out, main circle.
So Dreaded is full pushing it west.
West out, west out, west out, west out, west out, west out. Kill everything west inside us. Kill everything west inside us.
So he got a couple kills here. He got a couple kills. One more kill up here. Another kill.
Everything west inside us. Okay. Hold. Now walk east.
All right, now he's backing up. So this is good. He needs to back up. But look. Noob Slayer's already up here. His Zerg's already walking in. Well, actually, they're channeling Assassin Hood. Let me see.
Walk east again. Play by the choke. Play by the choke.
Michael down to
Yeah, okay, so it actually looks like Dreaded Legends here was the right call, right? Because it looks like Pora was not ready to return fire. So what it means is that Pora's engage was a real engage, okay? It was a real engage, but the reason it looked like a fake engage, because again, we could roll back the clip many times and it's gonna be really tough to look at, right? The reason is because when you have good disengaged tanks, a lot of times a real engage is gonna look like a fake engage, simply because your disengaged tanks do such a great job of stopping the enemy engage. Okay, so this is one of the things that it's really hard to look at, right? Like I told you guys, like I'm perfect. Like I'm really good at reading the enemy's movements and stuff like that. I'm really good at that shit. But you can't always read it. And this is the major strength of a bait and switch tactic, because bait is hard to understand. It's hard to always know what to do, right? You can bait the enemy and then you don't know if they're baiting you or you're baiting them, and it gets really confusing, right? This is exactly why we're watching these videos, because I want to show you guys just how tough it is, right? Now, it doesn't mean, like, what Dreaded Legends engaged there was perfectly fine, right? He did the right call. That's great. He got kills and all that. If I had been in his shoes, I would have called shallow and then walk east, which means what? I would not have killed as many people as him in that engage. However, that's because I tend to be more of a defensive type caller, right? I prefer to live to see another engage than to try to just pounce on the enemy if I'm not 100% sure. And that's another thing that we got to pay attention to, is that every caller is different, right? Every caller has their strengths, their weaknesses, and every caller is going to call differently, right? And so understanding how each caller plays is going to help you play better against them, but it's also going to help you play better if they are your caller, right? All right, so let's look at another one here. We got Mojo, King Mojo's video. This is actually Blue Dawn's video, but this is Mojo calling. Let me...
Come on, we get around the lake. On this one.
110. 110. Yeah, all right. I think that's where it is.
Got purge that thing.
All right, so King Mojo's right here, the caller, right? Blue Army. I think this is against Raid. Yeah, Raid Southwest. We've looked at this video before because we were looking at Blue Dawn before when we were looking at like Galatine play and stuff like that. But this video also works for what we're looking at right now. So Blue Dawn's right here. We got King Mojo right next to him. So the front line is right here. He's at the very front line. Northeast is the rest of the Zerg.
Oh no, I hit.
Gravity here, gravity push. Gravity 3, 2, 1, hits up.
So right now he's calling an engage straight south, right? He's calling an engage. Let's listen.
On the plan.
Now he's saying the front line, right? He's saying the front line.
Yeah, I'm pushing southwest of you. Look.
I'm just trying to stay alive right now.
Now he's saying back up, right? He's not saying let's hold, even though there's like a little choke area that he can hold down southwest here. He's not wanting to hold. He just wants to back up, right? So effectively, what is this? This is a full engage shallow, right? Even though he's not calling it specifically like that, right? This is exactly what is happening.
Yo, walk back on it. Come northeast.
Yeah, I'm waiting.
Listen, back to west now.
Alright, I'm
the pressure's gone.
All right, so he said now the pressure's gone, right? Now we're gonna walk back southwest.
We put the pressure now.
I'm
about to engage in 10 seconds.
I'm two.
Gravity push.
So look, what he did is, again, he did a full engage shallow. He absorbed, he came back, right? Now he's walking into the enemy, and this time he wants to be aggressive. And why can he be aggressive? Well, it's simple. Because he knows that he's gonna have cooldowns before the enemy, right? So Blue Army here is gonna have cooldowns before raid is. So therefore, Mojo knows that he can call very aggressively. So basically, this is the switch. That's what I'm saying.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Southwest is deep southwest. Deep southwest. As deep as you can. As deep as you can. As deep as you can.
Hit it?
Oh my god. Yo, because another. That looks like they're gonna.
Oh my god.
Walk back to the. Give me cleanse up here. Give me cleanse up here. Give me cleanse up here. Kill the cop. Son of a. Kill the cop. Son of a.
I'm gonna die here.
They're full engage on me.
You're good, you're good, you're good.
14 seconds to return. 14 seconds to return. We're playing beautiful, boys. Good shit, fucking shit, baby. Listen, you know what it is. Walk the west now.
All right, so anyway, the end of this fight is Blue Army wins. They end up running right down. But essentially, that's what the tactic is, right? Again, this bait and switch tactic is not new, right? It's just that people have been using the style of one party engage and then the rest of the engage a lot recently, okay? But at the same time, a lot of callers are forgetting these other ways of doing the same bait and switch tactic. There are a lot of like the full shallow engage. That stuff is very important. The fake engage, sometimes, for the most part, honestly, a lot of times it doesn't work. But when it does, it helps a lot, right? Because you have all your cooldowns and it's very quick. So all those different types of baiting is very, very important. The next one is a video from me. Honestly, I don't even remember what video this is. I just know I had a video of myself here. Oh, okay. All right. So this is just a clip because I didn't record the whole fight in here. So this is actually when I was playing with Take Care. This was like season 15, I think. Season 16? 16. I think 16. I was playing with Take Care. This was a big fight. The blob in the southeast that you see is PoE, but they don't actually end up in the fight. So this is Take Care. We're on the east and we're fighting against Escalation, who's on the west, right? And so Del Negro's calling for Escalation right now, and Ellipsis was calling for Take Care, but he died. And so then I picked up the calls and I just kept calling. Now this is the outpost here north of us, and there's a wall, there's a ridge down to the south here. So this is effectively a choke, right? So what I do with my guys is that we were actually in the back foot. Escalation was beating us, right? That's also why we lost our main color, because we were taking quite a few losses. And so we were kind of regrouped and we were going to fight a little bit here and we were going to start fighting again. But effectively, Escalation had the advantage on us right now, right? And so what I did is I essentially took Escalation's advantage because they knew that they were winning the fight. So they knew that they had more people and more damage and more whatever than us, right? And so I took that and I kind of used it against them. Right before this video started, I basically told all my Zerg to just full engage shallow, right? So that's what I told you guys. I prefer to do that style, right? I mean, everybody's different, but that's what I prefer. So I told my guys to full engage shallow. That's why you see some of my DPS up here still on the west, because they full engage shallow to the west. And then I tell them to back up. And now I want you guys to listen to comms.
You coming east, coming east, coming east. Disengage now, disengage now, disengage now, disengage now.
So this is right after I'm telling my guys to go back east. And, you know, the enemy's kind of, they're taking the bait, right? I full engage shallow, right? Remember, if I full engage, the enemy is very likely to engage, okay? Especially if they know that we're already low on numbers and they're already winning the fight. So they're taking the bait, they're full engaging on me, but I knew I had the cooldowns and I knew I had the defensives. So I knew I was going to be able to have the cooldowns before them. So
beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Yo, this is northeast as well. This time, we're going to go in deep this time. The west in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Get in their fucking face. Get in their fucking face. Delete the fucking front line. Delete the whole front line here. Delete the front line. Beautiful. Now come back. You come in.
All right, so that's basically it, right? So again, I didn't record the whole thing. I'll show you guys the actual engagement again, because it's only like a 17-second clip. But essentially, like right before this, I full engaged shallow on the west, and then I backed up east. And then when I saw the enemy and counter engaging, I told my D-tanks to stop the enemy, and then I counter engaged. Right? This is like super classic bait and switch, right? Like there was nothing fancy about it. This is why it's such a good example.
Come east. Disengage now, disengage now, disengage now, disengage now, disengage now. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Yo, disengage northeast as well. This time, we're going to go in deep this time. The west in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Get in their fucking face. Get in their fucking face. Delete the fucking front line. Delete the whole front line here. Delete the front line.
Yeah, so that's it, right? So essentially, and I think a lot of my guys weren't engaging because, again, like I told you, we were kind of regrouping. So a lot of the guys were regearing and coming back. So that's why there's a lot of people up there. But anyway, this was a good fight with Escalation. I think at the end of the fight, we ended up winning the fight after this. We kept on pushing them. But after this engagement, Ellipsis picked up the calls because he arrived literally as we were engaging. And so, you know, he started calling again. So let me see. We got the last one we have is with Africa now. Oh, this is an Oculto video. Yo, Oculto makes some nice videos, man. You guys should subscribe to this man on YouTube. He makes some nice videos.
Só dá aquele W no meio deles e eu apanhei juntos. Vou deixar passar a ponte pro NW daqui a pouco. Deixa eles virem, a gente tá bem. Ajuda a front, por favor. Eles vão entrar no meio de vocês, tá tudo bem. Vem andando, vem andando, vem andando. A gente vai entrar na Bela no W. Cola pra gente. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. W cola pra gente, W cola pra gente na frontline. W cola pra gente na frontline. Boa, escuta. Explode a front, Cai pro norte, cai pro norte. Boa skills. Cai pro norte, cai pro norte, cai pro NW.
So that looked like a full engage shallow. But he's actually going to use that as a means to walk back through that choke. I don't know if he's going to turn around here.
Cai pro NW, passa o choke pro NW, vem passando o choke pro NW. A gente passou no E, a gente tá bem. Ajuda passou o choke, eles vão flopar a gente de novo, tá? Roda um pouco. Escuta, roda um pouco no choke agora, roda um pouco no choke agora. Escuta, a gente vai andar apressando o choke agora, Vem cá, anda pro sul, anda pro sul. Anda pro sul, sim, anda pro sul.
A sua back é a
anda pro sul. Sim, vem andando pro sul, 2, 1, cate a frontline no EC, frontline, cate a frontline, não vai chip, cate a frontline, escuta, agora cai um pouco.
So the reason this is hard for me is because I don't speak Portuguese, right? So that he's calling in Portuguese, and I don't speak Portuguese, but I do understand some of the calls right here. So like he right now, this was definitely a frontline engage, right? So he was talking about engaging on the front line. And now I think he's saying to back up, right? And then they're fighting against, it looks like Pora down to the southeast.
Demo armo, cai pro norte. Demo armo, grupo sol. Logs, demo armo, cai pro norte. Vai nos nossos tablet. Tranca, segura eles, por favor. Anda pro norte. Desmontaram o down. Anda pro Nhi junto. Ajuda pro sol. Cabeça estabilizou. Joga junto, não separa. Joga junto. Olha pro sul. Roda, sul. Espera. Roda no sul.
All right, so here, he's going to have cooldowns before them because he engaged first, full engage, shallow, right? And I want you guys to look at the HP bars. I know they're like low as fuck down here, but...
Anda pro norte.
So here, he just engaged and they're returning fire.
Anda pro norte. Desmontaram o down. Anda pro Nhi junto.
Now, what happened here is that Pora actually used a one party engaged, and Africa actually called for demon armors and defensives. Right? This is why you see a bunch of Judicator armors on the floor and you see demon armors being popped, right? Is because Africa actually called for that. So if essentially Pora knew that Africa was fake engaging, and so or bait engaging, and so that's why Noob Slayer then went and fake engaged himself. And then when he saw that the defenses were dropped, that's when Noob Slayer full sent it.
Ajuda pro sol. Cabeça estabilizou. Joga junto, não separa. Joga junto, olha pro sul. Roda, sul, espera. Roda no sul. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2.
Either way, though, his party lived it, right? I don't think I see a single dead one here. So his party lived it. So he still has, even though Noob Slayer's bait and switch worked, it doesn't matter because Africa's Zerg survived. And now that means that Africa's Zerg is able to return fire.
Rua no estábulo, na rua. Não tem clap, hita só 3 na frontline mesmo. Não tem clap. Cai do play agora. Joga junto, anda. A gente tá bem, não corre. Passou na frontline. Anda pra...
Alright, I can't really find... There was one specific thing I wanted to show you guys on this video. I can't really find it. I forgot to put in the timer of it. We'll keep watching the video as we finish up here. Let me see. Because yeah, that was the last video. So that's it for today. That's episode 26, bait and switch. It's very important to understand the strategies that are employed by every caller and to understand how they're being actually used and how you can accomplish the same strategy using different tactics, right? So with this strategy, we saw 4 different ways of baiting the enemy. Okay, that's the fake engage, the small engage, which is what everybody does, right? The full engage shallow, and then the pressure bait. Okay, those 4 are the different ways that you can bait the enemy. But you have to use a lot of these brain games to try to bait the enemy, right? you have to understand, as we saw with like Slaya, we saw with Sarge, we saw who else did we see it with? I don't remember. There was a third one, but we saw it with multiple callers, right? And these callers are really good callers, right? So every single one of them that we saw today are good callers. And so essentially what I'm saying is that the callers that are good are the ones that are able to use the same tactics, but are able to switch it up to make it work depending on the situation. Okay, like we saw all these different callers doing different styles of, different types of switches, where it's like they would bait each other and they would constantly just bait each other back and forth because they were waiting on to see which one's gonna bite first and who's gonna make the first mistake, right? And it seems to be that there's a lot of things happening. There's a lot of engages happening. There's a lot of movement happening. There's a lot of damage dropping. But when you understand the rhythm of the fight, you understand the back and forth, you understand what the callers are trying to accomplish, then it gives you a better ability to predict what the next move is going to be, whether by the enemy or by your own caller. If you know your caller's going to call and engage 5 seconds before he even starts a countdown, you're going to be in a much better shape to hit that clump than if you only react to what he's saying 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, right? Same thing for the enemy. If you know the enemy's going to engage 5 seconds before they engage, you're gonna be in a better spot to survive it, or at least to save your buddies from that engagement. So that's it for today. If you guys have any comments, questions, concerns, drop them in the chat right now. I'll give you guys about a minute, and then we're gonna close it up. All right, I don't see anything. So next week, exactly 1 week from today, 00 UTC, we're gonna be doing the episode 27, and that's gonna be episode 27, movement and positioning, right? That episode is actually very, very important, and I feel like that episode is gonna give you more questions than answers, to be honest, because it's a thought-provoking episode. It's gonna make you think about everything that you do, every movement that you make. But that's the way we gotta do it to get better, right? So getting better is not easy. Otherwise, everybody would be better. So, all right, I appreciate you guys, and I'll see you guys in the next one.